The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
Travis Hunter made the hard but correct decision.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes.
Travis Hunter is currently in the process of being questioned about everything, right? I think a lot of people want to know, how are we going to get an answer out of Travis Hunter about his potential position, right? Because everyone wants to know, will he be a receiver? Will he be a corner? What drills is he going to do at the Combine to showcase X skills or X skills? And we learned today, Thursday, that is, that he's not going to be doing any of the drills. Now, I've been saying this for a long time, for about 2.5 weeks now, I would imagine, that he and Shedeur Sanders proved enough during the season that they don't really have anything to show at the Combine that they couldn't have already shown already, right? I think teams outside of the interviews will have their opinions about them, good or bad. And I think where they would gain the most is in the interview room, right? You're going to have a chance to talk to coaches, GMs, scouts, whatever it is, and just let them pick you apart, right? I think that's sort of the name of the game. The Combine is let the teams try to find your flaws, and you show them why, hey, I have no flaws, or the flaw that you thought I had is not there, right? I think that's sort of the vibe for Colorado, or for these guys at Colorado, because they're not really, I don't know. I feel like they're pretty good prospects at this moment, right? I don't think that they have a lot to prove, right? You win the Heisman, you win the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, you win the Defensive Player of the Year, and it's just one of those things where I think there's not much for you to show. And so one thing, I'll touch on this first. Travis Hunter decides not to participate in the Combine. I like that. He's going to interview, which is good for him, because I think that'll give him a good gauge on how teams view him or how teams plan to use him, because I do think that he, of all people, is going to need to have a unique strategy when the draft rolls around. If he is adamant about playing both ways, well, then you got to figure out a way to make that happen. 2, he is adamant about playing both ways, right? So let's hear what he had to say, because I think his answers, we're going to break down, we're going to overly dissect this. Let's dissect it together. So if you're in the comment section, get ready, get your listening ears on, because I think we're going to learn a lot from this, or at least what Travis Hunter has to say here.
I did some meetings at receiver, did some meetings at DB, so still up in the air. They say nobody has ever done it for real the way I do it, but I tell them that.
Right. And I think at the end there got cut off a little bit, but he's telling them, or he's talking about how people say that no one's ever played both ways the way he wants to, right? The examples are Charles Woodson, which he did it in college, kind of. Deion Sanders played a little bit of receiver, but not a lot. I think it was Patrick Peterson played a little bit of both ways. Mike Vrabel played a little bit of both ways, right? When guys play both ways at the NFL, it is usually gimmicky. It's like, okay, we're going to plug you in here for one play only, and you're just going to do your best on that play, and what happens, right? Now, Travis Hunter wants to be full-time at both positions, which I think is where it gets difficult, because when you're full-time at 2 positions, that means you're part-time at 2 positions, right? Because you can't really be a full-time receiver or corner at the NFL, because either way, you're going to have to go to one meeting or the other. Now, they could move the meetings around and stuff like that. I just think it gets really complicated. That being said, I think the feedback he's getting, or at least from that comment, you guys let me know. I like to read into things in Portuguese. We love the drama, if you will. I'm reading into it, and I'm hearing teams are telling him they're at least concerned or hesitant to be like, yeah, we're going to let you play receiver or corner, right? I think the best move for Travis and his people probably going to have to come up with a plan for yourself, right? Whether it's X amount of plays on this side of the ball or X amount of snaps, right? I don't know what the plan is, but I'm hearing him say, teams are telling me that I don't do this, or no one's done it like this before. And then he says he's interviewing at receiver or corner. that's telling me that teams are sort of, I don't know. Like, I don't think they're as open to the idea as he would have hoped. Right. And granted, this is what I tell everyone who asks me this, right? What if teams don't want him to play both ways? Well, guess what? All it takes is one team, right? It takes one team to fall in love with you for any player, really, in the entire draft. Whatever team that is, so whether it's the Bengals or the Raiders or whoever it is, just takes one team to fall in love with you. And then two, that one team, you have to communicate with them. So Travis Hunter, I think, has an interesting sort of journey ahead of him. That comment right there sort of tells me NFL teams are already laying the groundwork to not let him play both ways. That's what it tells me. I mean, I could be reading too much into it. And then there was another question where he was asked if he was going to play or if he was going to return kicks on punt or kickoff. And he was like, I already have two positions. I think two is enough or something like that. So I like how adamant he is about it. I think that's what's going to really keep this in play is his determination. Because if a team senses that he's wavering in a decision about playing both ways, I think that there's a possibility that they're going to be like, well, it doesn't really seem like you want to do it. So we're just going to pretend like that didn't happen. Right. So I think Travis Hunter really has to stay confident, stay strong in that belief that like, hey, I could do this, because realistically, if there is anyone who could do it, it's Travis Hunter. Right. He played, I think he averaged 112 snaps per game, had over 1,000 receiving yards, 11 pass breakups on defense. He had 16 total touchdowns, 15 through the air, 1 on the ground, and 4 picks. And he's great in man coverage. He's great in zone coverage. He's great over the middle as a receiver. He's great as a vertical threat. He's great in the end zone. Like, he's great at everything. So if I'm him, I'm confident in my abilities. Even if I'm not him, like I personally, Kevin Borba, host of Locked On Buffs, am confident that Travis Hunter has a chance. I just don't know if it's going to be how he imagined. That being said, that's what the combine is for, right? And he'll have a chance to showcase his skills. He's going to be partaking in the Big 12 showcase or pro day, excuse me. And I think that'll give teams another chance it'll give teams a chance to see him up close and personal if they haven't already. The good thing about Coach Prime in Colorado is there was guys at every single game. There were scouts at practices. Like, teams have seen Travis a little bit, or at least a lot, or I think a lot. They should know what he is, right? They just have to figure out how they can use him. And it'll be interesting to see if he talks again with the receivers. Excuse me, I have the hiccups now. It'll be interesting to see just overall what the vibe is. And according to Adam Schefter, it's super important for Travis to be the number 1 pick in April's draft, and he's ready and willing and uniquely. This is Adam Schefter's report. Sorry, extremely weird, worded weirdly. Travis Hunter said Thursday it is super important to him to be the number 1 pick in April's NFL draft, and that he is ready, willing, and uniquely able to play on both sides of the ball in his professional career. We'll see what happens. Right, anything can happen. It takes one team. That quote that he gave, it didn't sound like that's the feedback he was getting, but again, maybe I was reading too much into it.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Friday night NBA action boasts a variety of lines to get in on. The Nuggets 1-point favorites on the road against the Pistons, who have won 8 straight. The 2 best teams in the East face off in Boston, where the Celtics are favored by 2.5 over the Cavs, and the Clippers 1.5-point dogs in their crosstown showdown with the Lakers. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Bo Davis is leaving LSU.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers.
The gigantic news that hit us Thursday morning is that LSU defensive line coach Bo Davis is now Saints defensive line coach Bo Davis. This is disappointing, but not altogether surprising. I'll get to what this means for LSU in just a quick second, but I think the question most people are asking today is why? Why is Bo leaving LSU? Bo Davis played at LSU in the early 90s, coached at LSU under both Nick Saban and Les Miles. And after making his way around from the NFL with the Dolphins under Nick Saban, the Jaguars, the Lions, time back in college with Saban at Alabama, at UTSA. Spent 3 seasons at the University of Texas before coming home to LSU in 2024. And 13 months after LSU brought him back to Baton Rouge, making Bo Davis the highest paid defensive line coach in the country at $1.25 million per year. He's off to the NFL. Y'all, it is just a product of the time. Doesn't make it easier. Doesn't mean you're going to like this, but I mean, Nick Saban retired because he was sick of NIL and what college football has become. Jim Larinaga from Miami retired in the middle of the season for the same reason. Chip Kelly went from being the head coach at UCLA to the OC at Ohio State to now an OC in the NFL because he wanted to get out of the college game. Jeff Hafley was the head coach at Boston College, went to be the DC at the Green Bay Packers because he wanted to get out of the college game. When Kalen DeBose took the Alabama job last year, he hired Kane Womack and Maurice Lindquist. They were the head coaches at South Alabama and Buffalo, respectively, and they left their head coaching jobs to be assistants because it's better to be an assistant at Alabama today, allegedly, than a head coach at a G5 trying to keep pace. Sean Elliott left Georgia State, where he was the head coach, to be a position coach at South Carolina. Jerry Kill had a 10-win season as the head coach at New Mexico State. He left to be a consultant at Vanderbilt. It's not every coach. It's not even a majority of coaches. I just listed Saban, Larinaga, Kelly, Hafley, Womack, Lindquist, Elliott, Kill. It's 8. I just listed 8. There's thousands of college football coaches, and all of them are trying to fight the same thing: how to modernize in this new era of NIL, rev share. They're trying to navigate it. But for some of the old heads who have been around for a long time, it's very difficult. They grew up in a different era. They coached in a different era. And now at this point in their career, after decades of tilling the soil and planting their seed and cultivating everything, now like that, it changes so dramatically. A lot of them just don't have the stomach for it. And Bo Davis is one of them. You know, Bo's in his mid-50s. And, you know, all the conversations I've had, it's just very clear. You know, Bo Davis doesn't like NIL. He doesn't like having to deal with agents and reps. Bo has a reputation as a great recruiter. Well, recruiting is no longer about cultivating a relationship. It's about the bottom line. There's no greater example of that than Bryce Underwood. I mean, my goodness, nobody had a better relationship with that young guy than Joe Sloan. LSU invested 3 years of resources in recruiting Bryce Underwood. They had him committed for a solid year. He didn't even take a visit to Michigan. A campus is 30 minutes from his hometown, didn't take a visit for a solid year. Why? He didn't want to go to Michigan until the third richest guy in the world dropped $12 million on his lap. Then all of a sudden, Michigan looked pretty good. It's the nature of it. By the way, I'm not complaining. Y'all know where I stand on this. If you're an everydayer, and thank you for that, you know where I stand on this. I am the most pro NIL guy ever. I am the most pro transfer portal guy ever. And as bad as it sucks today because that cost you a great coach, the opposite's also true. You want to know why we're optimistic about LSU in 2025? NIL in the transfer portal, because LSU just went and spent a buttload of money on a transfer portal class that's going to hopefully help this team win a championship. Portal giveth, portal taketh away. But it doesn't change the fact that for some older coaches, it's just difficult to exist in this era where there's no glory in development. Kids can leave whenever they want, but you can't cut them if they stink. I mean, that's how it is in the NFL. You can't do it in college. You know, the other part of it is financial. Bo was getting $1.25 million at LSU this year. It was increasing $100K per year. Each year of his deal is a 3-year deal. As I was told, his number from the Saints is not quite that, but it's comparable. So he's going to make a lot of money. He's not going to have to deal with NIL or any of that stuff anymore. He's just going to go coach football at the highest level where he's been before, with the Lions, with the Dolphins, with the Jaguars. So Bo Davis off to the NFL. And, you know, it was interesting. Another part of this is the fact that LSU at times maybe didn't give him the resources he needed in NIL. I mean, think about it. A year ago, Bo Davis came to LSU and he had Dominic Williams and Simeon Barrow lined up. They were ready. They were ready to follow Bo Davis to LSU. Think of how different last year might have been if you had Dominic Williams and Simeon Barrow on your defensive line. But LSU wasn't going to pay him. Dominic Williams wanted $1.2 million. Simeon Barrow wanted $750,000. LSU wasn't going to pay him. So they didn't. How dramatic a turn LSU's made in a calendar year. If that had happened this year, have whoever you want. Just not what it was. Then you go into this recruiting class, and Bo puts all the effort into recruiting Jakeem Stewart out of New Orleans, and ultimately LSU stops at 1.5. He gets $2 million a year from USC. You lose him. You got outbid. You put all the time and effort and energy into recruiting and cultivating that relationship, which has worked so long for you, but you get outbid and you lose. I just think Bo got fed up with it. So what does it mean for LSU? It's bad for LSU. I mean, Bo was supposed to provide stability across that defensive front. You know, if you go back, remember, Ed Ogeron had Bill Johnson on staff for the championship year, and then in 2020, in the COVID year, then Bill Johnson retired. And in 21, Ed hired Andre Carter. Well, they were all fired after 21. Andre Carter wasn't retained. So in 22, Brian Kelly hired Jamar Cain. Jamar Cain coached in 22, and then in spring football after 22, before the 23 season, he takes a job with the Denver Broncos. They promote Gerald Chapman to the interim defensive line coach and ultimately hired Jimmy Lindsey. Jimmy Lindsey got sick right before the start of fall camp in 2023. Then they promote John Jancic. It's not going well. They bring back Pete Jenkins. John Jancic doesn't return. Pete Jenkins goes back into retirement. They hire Bo Davis for 2024. Now Bo Davis is gone. Just count this out to me. Just since 2020. Bill Johnson, Andre Carter, Jamar Cain, Gerald Chapman, Jimmy Lindsey, John Jancic, Pete Jenkins, Bo Davis, and whoever's next. That's 9. Whoever's next will be the 9th defensive line coach since 2020. 9th defensive line coach in 6 years. Hard to find stability there. And I'll tell you this also. Bo Davis maximized his players. He didn't get Barrow or Williams. Instead, they added Gio Paez and JVR Suggs. With bubblegum and duct tape, he stabilized that defensive line. His best guy, Jacobian Guillory, tears his ACL in game 2. Goes the whole season without his best, most veteran interior defensive player. Paez moves inside. Suggs is nothing more than a rotational player. Shand moves from end to tackle. Ahmad Bro, who is a high school defensive end, bulks up, moves inside to tackle. Dominic McKinley wasn't available for the first half of the season because of injury. Came on and became an effective player for you. The point is, you didn't have a lot to work with, and Bo Davis maximized whatever you had. What could it have looked like if you gave him a full cupboard? Like the 4 high school signees they just added. Like adding Sadir Mitchell from the University of Texas in the transfer portal. Having JVR Suggs, having Dom McKinley a year older, Ahmad Bro a year older. That'd be exciting. But unfortunately for For LSU, Bo Davis has an opportunity to go to the NFL, make comparable money in his home state, not far from his son, who's a student at Southeastern. He doesn't have to deal with NIL or all the other stuff that he doesn't love in college football anymore. So now Brian Kelly and LSU are searching for a new defensive line coach.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Friday night NBA action boasts a variety of lines to get in on. The Nuggets 1-point favorites on the road against the Pistons, who have won 8 straight. The two best teams in the East face off in Boston, where the Celtics are favored by 2.5 over the Cavs, and the Clippers 1.5-point dogs in their crosstown showdown with the Lakers. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks.
All right, so a couple things from the NFL Combine, which is something that, you know, as you move into the NFL draft era, or time of year, I should say, I am very much going to be interested to see how many Oregon players wind up getting drafted. Because at the end of the year, team wins a national championship, you look back and go, boy, look how many players they had drafted. Well, I have long stated, despite Oregon's horrific showing in the Rose Bowl, which I still have not gone back and fully watched, maybe I never will. Maybe it'll just always be too painful. I don't know. But the reason I think it's painful is because they had a real shot. They had a roster that was good enough to beat anyone in the country, which is proven by the fact that they beat the team that won the national championship, and it just didn't work out on one particular day, which is why we love college football, but also why we can hate college football. But Oregon's got a lot of guys that can get drafted here. And so I'm, of course, rooting for them forever and always. I love tracking #ProDucks in the NFL on Sundays, especially Justin Herbert. He's pretty good. And, you know, Mario is not too shabby either. And then you got Bo Nix with the Broncos. So why don't I start with that one? So Terrence Ferguson was getting interviewed and said that he had a long conversation or an extensive, you know, interview conversation with the Denver Broncos. I tell you what, I love my Seahawks. Mike McDonald was actually, recently singing Dan Lanning's praises, which made me just feel great as a Seahawks and Ducks fan. Like, oh, look, my two favorite football coaches in the world, just talking about how great they are and discussing all things football. That's wonderful. That is truly great. But when I heard the idea of Tiefer going to the Broncos, I tweeted out, my head might explode. Can you imagine Bo Nix throwing dimes to Troy Franklin and Terrence Ferguson on the same team? Boy, I tell you, I would still love my Seahawks, but I might become a Broncos fan really quick, really, really quick. So that was the first thing. The second thing that I wanted to bring up is Derek Harmon was every bit as good as you thought he was, and replacing him, Amari Washington needs to take the sort of step that I'm giddily excited at the prospect of him doing, because Derek Harmon is really good. He, with his performance at the Combine yesterday, solidified himself, I think, as a first-round pick. He ran about a 4.7, I think it was, in the 40-yard dash. He was moving well. Like, that's a first-round pick. So when I talk about Oregon's roster from one year to the next, which I will discuss a bit more in the third segment on today's show, that's one element that can't go overlooked, is look at all the talent that's going away. Even if you have super talented guys, Bear Alexander's promising. I love Amari Washington. Terrence Green could be really good. Are they Derek Harmon right here, right now? Or are they more likely to be Derek Harmon come 2026? Just something to ponder in there. But Harmon is an absolute bona fide beast, and I'm excited to see what he does in his NFL career because, man, he was great this past season. But he was a hugely impactful guy. Now, this might be the most interesting one. This is a tough question to answer, but Jordan Birch was asked which freshman impressed him the most this past season. You know, he's asked about Mateo Uyunglele as well, and, you know, had nice things to say, of course, because how can you not with how good Mateo is? And boy, talk about, you know, back-to-back first-round defensive line selections. Yeah, Oregon's probably going to have that this year with Harmon and the next year with Mateo. But Jordan Birch shouted out Dink Riggs, the running back, who was not one of the higher-rated recruits in Oregon's 2024 class, and only came in mop-up duty, but looked really good doing it. And freshman that stood out, Jordan Birch said, yeah, that guy, hard to tackle. That's a really good trait to be able to say about a running back. And so going into his second season, I don't know that there is a huge avenue for him to gain significant playing time, but that doesn't mean there isn't an avenue to gain some playing time. So in what we have seen with Dink Riggs, where, you know, as it was dubbed on the headset that we heard on Ducks versus them following, I think it was the Illinois game, you know, someone on the coaching staff, maybe I think it was Tosh Lupoy, said, you know, he's little Bucky. Go little Bucky. Kind of what he looks like. Not the biggest guy, not the fastest guy, but big enough, fast enough, and just hard to tackle. Just makes you miss in the hole. Some guys have that kind of ability where it's, hey, you're just not going to tackle me very easily. Jordan James will just run through your face. Dink Riggs is a very different kind of player. But for Oregon's running back room this year, Mekhi Hughes is going to be the lead guy. He comes over from Tulane in 2 seasons with the Green Wave with 2 different head coaches. It's wild. He's on his 3rd head coach and 3rd offensive coordinator in 3 years. He has run for over 2,700 yards in the last 2 years. So that's your number 1 guy. Noah Whittington's probably your number 2 because he's been the number 2, and he's quite good in that role. Second half of last year, Noah Whittington, man, I love when Noah Whittington looks right because running backs is that hot hand position where it's, hey, I want to have a secondary option to go to this guy over here if this guy's really not having his best game or isn't seeing the field well, or maybe he's a little bit dinged up. What I wonder about with Dink Riggs, and this applies to Jay Harris as well, the one-time D2 transfer from Northwest Missouri State last season, can either one of them pass Jaden Lamar in the running back depth chart? I think Jaden Lamar has a permanent role as a special teams guy after picking up the ball that Whittington dropped in the end zone against Boise State, saved the game, saved the undefeated season. I mean, in retrospect, you know, a loss might have helped Oregon I don't know. That game, you would have liked to win, right? You lose that game earlier in the year, things can spiral after how the Idaho game almost went down, which would have been one of the biggest upsets in the history of college football, by the way. But alas, it was not. So I wonder if Riggs can make a move up, you know, a year in the weight room, a year after learning the playbook and all that sort of stuff. Because I think Lamar is incredibly solid. I don't ever see him having the ability to be a feature back. You know, if you're a primary go-to guy in Oregon's backfield, there's usually one trait you have that makes you really stand out. What would that be for Jaden Lamar? Is it his speed? It's good enough. There's nothing wrong with good enough, by the way. You need those sorts of guys who are just solid, going to do what's asked of him. But is he super strong? No. Is he super big, super fast, super elusive? No, he's just kind of capable at everything, which makes him a quality player. But between him and Noah Whittington or Mekhi Hughes, yeah, much higher likelihood that he would lose his spot on the depth chart than either of the other two guys would, barring an injury, of course. That throws a wrinkle into all of this sort of stuff. But, I mean, we saw in 2023, Noah Whittington went down early in the year, and suddenly Jordan James was the number 2 guy, and then he rode that momentum into being the feature back this past season, and he popped. Now he's going to the NFL draft. So that sort of progression can be there, but he'd have to earn the number 3 spot. I just thought it was noteworthy that of all the freshmen, there were a lot of talented kids in that 2024 class. Highest rated at the time in Oregon history. And he went to Dink Riggs and said, yeah, that guy. So just keep your eye on that. I like Dink Riggs. I think he can be a really good back for Oregon based on what we've seen. But there, was a reason he wasn't playing this past year. I think it's, again, a crowded running back room. But, after the season, Hughes could come back for another year, could go to the NFL draft. Noah Whittington, I believe, is done after this season with the medical red shirt tossed in there and whatnot. That's an opening. That's an opportunity. Is he going to wait that long? Is he going to be able to get those carries? I don't know. I don't know the answers to all those questions.